What does the extension between the Baltimore Ravens and Justin Madubuike mean for the team's offseason plans? We talk about that and so much more coming up next year on this episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens. We are your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, and I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, coming to you from the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here today and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day on this Saturday. We are free and available on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube and audio form, wherever you get your shows. Be sure to subscribe, like the video in video form. Also subscribe and follow along in audio form, whether that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Bringing you 5 days a week plus bonus content of Ravens, whether it's news, analysis, updates. We have everything for you on Locked On Ravens. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Now, I was going to do a bonus episode anyway for today because, free agency's coming. There's a lot of stuff that we haven't talked about yet, so I was going to do that. But then the Justin Madubuike news drops. A 4-year extension, mega deal, $98 million, $75.5 million guaranteed, and $53.5 guaranteed at signing. It was a deal that many people wanted to have get done before the start of free agency. Madubuike was obviously franchise tagged earlier in the week. Eric DeCosta said they were still going to be working towards a long-term extension and wasted no time getting that thing done. So we're going to be talking about the meaning of the extension, both for Madubuike and for the Ravens. More has come out about the actual specifics of the extension as well. So we'll talk about those and run through those in the first part of the show. Then we'll get into the actual more specific stuff, but in terms of not only the specifics financially, but specifically for the Ravens, what it means moving forward. Then we'll get into what the Ravens actually could do, whether there could be a big move incoming or whether they're going to maybe play free agency safe in the final part of the show. So let's talk about the meaning for the Madubuike extension here. I think it's great for both sides. The Ravens, I think really both sides understood what was going on here. For Madubuike, there were a couple of different ways that he could have approached his quote-unquote free agency or his next extension here. For Madubuike, there were a couple other big defensive linemen who were waiting on contracts, who were going to sign contracts. Chris Jones from the Chiefs and Christian Wilkins from the Dolphins. Now, Madubuike decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to set this market because it's risk and reward both ways, right? Because what if Christian Wilkins doesn't get the deal that Madubuike is expecting him to get, and then that brings Madubuike's value down? Chris Jones, I think, is going to slot in right between Aaron Donald and Justin Madubuike in terms of the deals, but maybe there's less of a market. I don't know. Crazy things happen sometimes. So Madubuike gets this $98 million deal, and he beat out guys like Quinnen Williams and Dexter Lawrence, right? That was kind of the threshold that a lot of people had him at. He beat out those guys, and the Ravens love giving out those like $98.75 million extensions, like not quite $100 million, but right around it. I think they gave Marlon Humphrey like 98.5 or 98.75. I think Ronnie Stanley's deal was similar. Maybe his was 100. I can't remember. They gave Roquan Smith 100, so he wasn't 98. But Madubuike essentially an $100 million man, and all of his teammates congratulated him. The first thing Lamar Jackson said on Instagram was, hey, give me that money you owe me. So, hey, Madubuike can do that now. He certainly has the money to pay back Lamar Jackson unless he owes him $100 million. Then he only has 98 here to work with. But in my opinion, the Ravens also knew what time it was. Madubuike chooses to, quote-unquote, set the market himself and not risk guys going under market value and then that ruining his market. For the Ravens, they understood what time it was in terms of free agency. Baltimore was in, I don't want to say a pinch because they were going to be able to free up the space, and we're still probably going to see some moves that will happen over the next coming days, maybe some today, maybe some tomorrow before Monday's tampering period. The Ravens do have to be under the salary cap by the time free agency, the new league year, actually is here on Wednesday. But there is a shot here that we definitely see more. In fact, I think we do, because the Madubuike, the franchise tag, put the Ravens from $12 million under the cap to $10 million over it. Now that Madubuike has signed this extension, that franchise tag number disappears off the books. And we're starting to get that information on specifics, which we will talk about a little bit here in this first segment, but more so in the second segment. Just reading at The Athletic reporting that Madubuike's first-year cap hit is going to be right around $11 million. Could be like 12, so $11 million, let's just call it that. But there are going to be those different things of, well, what's his base salary, the signing bonus. We also got those, which again, stay tuned in the second segment. We'll reveal some more details of that Madubuike deal that dropped here pretty recently. At least at the time I'm recording this. Maybe by the time you're listening, it's old news. But we'll talk about that a little bit more. But so the Ravens now have space to work with. If the Ravens do have that first-year cap hit from Madubuike right around 11 to 12 million, that puts the Ravens right at or maybe $1 million under the cap right now, where a Lamar restructure could have freed up that money, about $11 million. Tyus Bowser release could have saved you 5.5. Ronnie Stanley post-June 1 was about $15 million. You can still make those moves if you want to, but now you open up that space just by extending Madubuike, securing his long-term future in Baltimore. It really is a win-win for both sides. And I'm just happy for Madubuike in general. This is a guy that has worked really hard to get to this point. Patrick Queen said on Twitter that he and Madubuike have talked about this every day, and Madubuike definitely got what he wanted. So it's a full circle moment. And I talked about this in the live stream. And again, just for those who don't know, if maybe new to the show here, we do live streams after every single piece of Ravens big news, plus after games. So, we're not going to have a game stream for a while, but we're going to have some big news streams coming up over the course of this week. If the Ravens make a bunch of moves before Monday or before Wednesday, we'll, of course, if there's a flurry of them, go live for those as well. But I said on the stream that 2020 draft class really they were behind. Usually when rookies come in, they have the full package, and you go into the facility, you do the work, you meet the coaches, you get a feel for the NFL game and just what being in the NFL is like. That 2020 class didn't have that because of COVID. So they were doing virtual meetings and virtual workouts and virtual OTAs. And they didn't really have like a rookie mini camp per se, right? They didn't get that opportunity. And I don't want to say stunted growth, but it certainly put them behind the eight ball in terms of just everything a regular draft class would have gotten, not, well, quote unquote regular draft class, but a non-COVID draft class would have had. So for Madubuike, for Patrick Queen, for Geno Stone, even for guys like J.K. Dobbins, Devin Duvernay, right? We've seen a lot of that 2020 draft class ball out, and credit to them for really pushing hard and working hard for this. And for the Ravens, this was the right move. Madubuike is a player, the interior pass rush. I've said it over and over and over again. If you're an everyday, you're probably tired of me saying it. Interior pass rush is so hard to find. The Ravens honestly have not had a pass rusher like this on the interior consistently. And hopefully it's more than 1 year consistent, but that consistent pass rush we saw in 2023, they hadn't had that since a guy like Haloti Ngata or Trevor Pryce, right? Those guys were disruptive interior rushers. It's so valuable because it's so rare in the league. Usually when you talk about pass rush, it's, the edge rushers and the outside linebackers and those defensive linemen in the middle are just for stuff in the run. But that's not the case whatsoever. When you have an interior presence like that, who's just such a disruptor, it makes everything easier for everybody on that defense. And Madubuike is certainly one of the more talented defensive linemen in this league. So I know people call him baby Aaron Donald. Credit to Spencer Schultz of Exit 52 for coming up with that one. He got flagged for that one. I think it was like 3 years ago, I can't remember how long ago it was, but Spencer got some flack for that. But now you see the comparison everywhere. And Madubuike trains with Aaron Donald as well. So we can kind of see where everybody's making that comparison. But it was a great Friday news dump, right? I don't think anybody was expecting. And I think when he was franchise tagged, the overall consensus was, yeah, this was expected, and we're not going to expect anything until maybe before the draft or closer to that July 15th deadline they had. And I have seen some questions on social media, more so just about, okay, now can you franchise tag Patrick Queen because the franchise tag from Madubuike is gone? The answer to that question is no. The franchise tag ended up, when that deadline passed. You can only franchise tag one player. It's not like you can sign a guy to an extension from the franchise tag and then you get the franchise tag again. It doesn't work that way. Franchise tag deadline was last week, and regardless, you can only put the franchise tag. There's no transferability on that tag if you sign a guy to an extension. So for those asking about Patrick Queen, the answer to that is no. Patrick Queen's still going to be an unrestricted free agent here, unless the Ravens agree to an extension with him before free agency starts. But that's very, very, very unlikely. Madubuike gets the extension, and I'll kind of talk about more of the specifics of the deal for Madubuike. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll be right back here on this bonus episode of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Robinhood. And with Robinhood, did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost in every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim it as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to RRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years with 3% matching on transfers and subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is registered broker-dealer. We're back our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Saturday bonus episode. Appreciate everybody for giving me some time on their weekend. Hopefully everybody's enjoying the weekend as we gear up for the start of free agency. The legal tampering period begins on Monday. Of course, we'll be covering that over here on Locked On Ravens with live streams, breaking down the biggest moves. We'll be having our regular 6 a.m. episodes. We're 5 days a week on Locked On Ravens, Monday through Friday anyway. But of course, we'll have that bonus content as well. Yesterday was 1,200 consecutively for me on Locked On Ravens. Since starting this, I've never missed an episode. When I talk about holidays, it's been 5 days a week for me every single weekday, and I've absolutely loved doing it. We're also trying to start up on Instagram here. On Twitter, you can follow me at ChaosStriker34, but on Instagram, we're starting up there. You can follow me at ChaosStriker34 as well. And we actually had a mailbag question come in through Instagram from Ray, who said, what does this signing mean for Kyle Hamilton and Tyler Linderbaum? So Ray's kind of looking towards the future a little bit. And by the way, just a side note, if you want to send me mailbag questions over on Instagram or Twitter or anything like that, I'll do my best to, one, just answer them in the DM themselves, but two, get them on the show here. So shout out to Ray for this one. And with this, again, yeah, it's a little more into the future, but the Ravens this is a window that the Ravens have right now. This is Lamar Jackson's prime. And so when you sign a guy like Justin Madubuike to an extension, you have to be able to go out and still improve your team while having all these big money contracts. And so what the Ravens have done with some of these contracts, so a guy like Ronnie Stanley, a guy like Marlon Humphrey, we can start there, where those guys had lower cap hits in their first years. And I'm just talking in general. Those big contracts generally have lower cap hits in the first year. And then as you move on through, whether it's a 4-year extension, a 5-year extension, or just those deals, if you bring in an outside free agent, all of a sudden the cap hits begin to go up. It's starting about year 3. And then that kind of paves the way for restructures and other things. So it's almost like a cycle where, for example, they had Ronnie Stanley and Marlon Humphrey get expensive. They at least started to get expensive a couple of years ago with their cap hits. Then they are able to bring in a Marcus Williams, and they're able to bring in even like a Roquan Smith. You sign him to an extension. Mark Andrews also, you sign him to an extension. And obviously Lamar. Now, as those cap hits begin to go up, others will expire, like Ronnie Stanley, like Marlon Humphrey, and that paves the way for either them to be re-signed to lesser cost or they just go all together, and then those other guys slot in. So in the next couple of seasons, we'll see the Marcus Williams deal, the Mark Andrews deal, the Roquan Smith deal kind of slot in there. And I'm going to quickly pull up the Ravens. I think I got this Pro Track here, and they do a great job of breaking down everything. But in terms of the cap hit, for example, Roquan Smith last offseason, right, signed that 5-year, $100 million deal. Now, his cap hit is only $13 million on an $100 million deal. And before that, his cap hit was only $9 million. But then you get to year 3. In the next 3 years, so 2025, 2026, and 2027, it goes from $9 million and 13.5 in the first 2 years. Those last 3 years, 22.5, 27.5, and 27.5. So usually those deals have a couple of years. Those first 2 years, they have a lower base salary. Roquan's base salary in 2023 is 4.5, and then this year it's going to be 6. But then that number jumps to 15, then 16, then 16 again. Marcus Williams, his deal is now expensive. Again, third year of a 5-year deal for him. Marcus Williams, his base salary in year one was $1 million. Base salary last year, second year of that deal, $1 million. And what did that result in? A cap hit of $4 million in that first year, $7 million in that second year, gives them financial flexibility. Now in 2024, Marcus Williams' cap hit is $18 million, followed by $18 million again, followed by $20 million in 2026. That base salary has jumped up from $1 million to $12 million, $12 million, $14 million. Where am I going with this? What does this have to do with anything? With the Hamilton and Linderbaum extensions, and I don't know what I'd do if the Ravens didn't sign either of those guys to an extension. They have to at this point, right? But they're going to use the same structure where those other big-time extensions are going to slot in. The older big-time extensions will expire, and you can have those younger players signed to extensions where the first couple of years are going to be lower on the base salaries, lower on the cap hits for the first 2 years of that deal, ideally, and then it's just the same cycle over and over. And we are now seeing this. Madubuike, some of the specifics, again, have been released for this deal. Mike Florio, or Mike Flores, as Lamar Jackson calls him, of Pro Football Talk, ended up putting out some of the specifics he heard. And he said that Madubuike, first of all, got a $25 million signing bonus. So that's big. That's 10 days within the day of signing. So you get that pretty early on if you're in a Madubuike. Madubuike's 2024 base salary is $6 million fully guaranteed. Now, base salary versus what his actual cap hit is, those are not the same thing. His base salary, it helps if that is lower, but you also have to take into account some of that signing bonus in the cap hit, option money in that cap hit, and those details, to my knowledge, aren't released at the time of this recording it, but we do know the base salary for the entirety of the deal here. So again, $6 million base salary in 2024, has a $7.5 million base salary in 2025. Then in 2026 is $22 million, 2027, $18.5 million. So again, first 2 years of that deal for Madubuike, relatively low. Then you have the last 2 years, you get a higher cap hit, but you can again slot younger guys in as those older, bigger deals expire, like Ronnie Stanley, Marlon Humphrey, etc. You can restructure those guys, bring them back, whatever you want to do, extend them for less money. But it's all about, you almost have like 4 or 5 slots for big contracts, depending on, your team and where you are. So those slots are always just rotating players. And then you can still have 7 or 8 guys on big time extensions or big time deals, but the cap hits will actually flow in and out of those spots. Now, Madubuike also has a $15 million fully guaranteed option bonus in 2025. His 2026 base salary is guaranteed for injury at signing and fully guaranteed on the 5th day of the 2025 league year. That's natural. Usually 3 or 4 years after you get that fully guaranteed from injury. So he's protected there. Then he has a roster bonus of $4 million in 2027, which is due on the first day of the league year. So the Ravens technically have an out on this deal. At the very maximum, it's a 3-year deal. If you want to get out of it after the 4th year, you can. That roster bonus is going to be big. Now, again, the guarantees do make things a little more complicated, where, again, I don't know these numbers right now, but more than 54% of the contract is fully guaranteed at signing, and more than 77% of the deal is guaranteed just as practical as well. So Madubuike, if he had 2 tag years, if he was tagged in 2024, played on the tag, and tagged in 2025, played on the tag, he would have earned $48.62 million. In the first 2 years, the guaranteed at signing, he'll get 53.5. That guaranteed at signing money is 53.5 instead. So it's 24.5 average annual value, slots him in right behind Aaron Donald, second most in the league, who gets 31.67. We're going to see what happens with Chris Jones and Christian Wilkins, but I do think the timing was really good and right for both Madubuike and for the Ravens. But this is it's the gymnastics of everything. The cap is real. I know a lot of people say it's not, but it is real. There are just different ways you can maneuver it, whether it's making those first-year salaries low. We had Brian McFarland. We've talked with Brian for the past 3 weeks here as the Ravens salary cap expert, and he has said, in something that's pretty common knowledge in general, is just making those first-year cap hits lower so you have more flexibility. The Ravens have also used void years these last couple of years. Well, technically last offseason, they've started to do it, whether it's been with Lamar or Odell. They added a void year to Nelson Aguilar's deal. This is when you have to maximize things, right? I talked about it at the beginning of the show. I've talked about it for a while now. This is Lamar Jackson's prime. You can't front load those deals and say, okay, let's have financial flexibility in a couple of years and just front load all these guys' contracts and sit out for agency for 2 or 3 years. It's not, you can't do that. And not a lot of teams do that anyway. A lot of these big money deals you see are backloaded, and they're not truly 4 or 5 year deals. As I said, this Madubuike deal might be 2 years, then you get a restructure in, then you get another restructure in, or maybe it's 2 years of the restructure, and then he plays it out. But really, we're going to start seeing restructures as well. When you start to talk about Ronnie Stanley, everybody's talking about that one. We're going to probably see it with Marlon Humphrey, Roquan Smith, Mark Andrews eventually. Lamar will get his deal restructured at some point. So just because Madubuike signs this deal right now does not mean these are the final numbers that when we're talking again in 4 or 5 years, we're going to say, oh, yeah, Madubuike played out that whole contract and there was no movement on it. There are going to be some particulars of the deal, but he certainly earned every penny of it, and we're going to see how it plays out for the Ravens. But it was a move they had to make. I think at the top of a lot of people's checklists, it was get Justin Madubuike back in Baltimore and make sure he's in Baltimore for a long time. Baltimore absolutely did that, and for good reason, because he's a very talented player. Coming up, though, in the final part of the show, we'll talk about if there's a potential big move incoming, and again, how the Ravens can maneuver free agency a little bit more without the franchise tag on Justin Madubuike and with Madubuike on an extension. Stay tuned. Lots to get to here on the Saturday edition of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Game Time. There have been plenty of frustrating ticket buying experiences in my life. Sometimes I wasn't sure if the seats were good. Sometimes I couldn't find last-minute tickets. There were no good deals as well for a lot of the times also. You shouldn't have to worry, though, when you're buying tickets to your next big event, because Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With current last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from receipt, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. And the Game Time app has a lot of great things on there. Unfortunately, no Ravens games for a while, but there are plenty of concerts in the Baltimore area. Plus, we got opening day baseball coming with the Orioles, and the Orioles are going to have plenty of exciting baseball this year to look forward to. And the app, again, great things on there. The experience is awesome. You can find views from all the seats in the venue. Plus, Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps, and they're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on your tickets. With zone deals to pick the section, and Game Time picks seats for big time savings. Take the guess we're going to buy tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON, spelled LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guarantee. We're back, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostreicher still talking with you here. Weekend edition of the show, bonus episodes. We're starting to do some more bonus episodes now as we continue to grow the show. I've been growing again ever since 2019 when I took over right before the Ravens MVP season for Lamar Jackson, going 14-2. Unfortunately, didn't finish the job back then. Didn't finish the job this time either, but the Ravens will hope to attack free agency and start to build this roster out again. We'll be covering it all here on Locked On Ravens. So be sure to subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content. If you're an everydayer, really appreciate you checking in again. If it's the first time listening, welcome to the show. Hopefully you're enjoying the content. If you're somewhere in the middle as well, welcome in, welcome back to the show. Now, the Ravens are in a pivotal offseason. Now, we talked about how the Lamar offseason last year was so huge for him, and it was because obviously you want to have one of the top quarterbacks in the league. Lamar Jackson was, and there was some uncertainty leading up to the draft about just who their quarterback would be, but of course the deal gets done. But I would argue, and we'll talk about this throughout the course of the next couple of days, I would argue this offseason is as important as that one, if not even more important, outside of the whole quarterback thing. Because now you have Lamar under contract. This is Lamar's prime. You were so good in the regular season last year. You're the best team in the regular season if you're the Ravens, but you just couldn't get over that playoff hump. Now, they made progress. I know some people don't want to hear this, but they did advance past the divisional round. It was the first time since they won the Super Bowl in 2012, 2013. That is a step in the right direction. But I said this, and if you were with me on Locked On Ravens back in August when we were doing season predictions and what my expectations were and what I would consider a failure season, I said, look, if you don't make it to the AFC Championship game, if you're the Ravens, that's a bust. That's a failure. But expectations can change. And with how good the Ravens were in 2023, with how dominant they were waxing teams, waxing good teams, elite teams. My expectations changed and said you have to at least make the Super Bowl. Not honestly be a disappointment if they didn't win the Super Bowl. Of course, they didn't end up getting there. So now you have to attack this offseason, and it makes it even more pivotal that they've lost a bunch of coaches. They lost Mike McDonald and Denard Wilson and Anthony Weaver, et cetera, et cetera. They lost Joe Ortiz to the Chargers from an executive position. So now they've replaced guys, and hopefully those coaches will be able to mesh and gel. Zach Orr being the new defensive coordinator, first-time play caller, plus you have just this boatload of free agents, right? The Ravens have a really talented free agent class. It was headlined by Madubuike, not so much anymore, obviously, but now it's guys like Patrick Queen and Geno Stone and Odell Beckham and Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy, Ronald Darby, Arthur Millette, all these different guys, Kevin Zeitler. A lot of free agents the Ravens have to make decisions on, but now with this Madubuike extension, it does free up the money. As we talked about earlier in the show, the Ravens went with the franchise tag from $12 million under to $10 million over. The extension, right now, they're right at the cap. They're like right there, maybe $1 million or $2 under it, depending on what the actual specifics are of the whole thing when the deal is released in its entirety. But the Ravens just gives them a lot more wiggle room, essentially, if they do make some of these other moves around the edges and really alongside the margins when you talk about how the Ravens could approach this offseason. We were talking about it with Madubuike on the franchise tag. Maybe you had like one medium-sized move in you from outside the organization to try to bring back some of your guys. But I think they now have maybe one big move or two medium-sized moves. And obviously that doesn't just mean they're going to make two moves this offseason. I expect other smaller moves around the edges, bringing in some veterans, much like they did last year. This is not also going to be a sprint for them. Ravens aren't a team, and historically we've seen it, they're not a team that goes out there and spends $50 or $100 million on the first day of free agency, $200 million on the first day of free agency, and says, all right, that's it, we're done. The Ravens like to play the long game here. They like to play the long game for literal months. Literally, what are we talking about? Last year, Kyle Van Noy was on his couch week 3. The Ravens bring him in after week 3. I mean, it took the entire offseason and then some to get a massive contributor to their roster. So I think expectations should be high, and I think the Ravens should try to make really substantial moves this offseason, obviously within the limit of their cap. Doesn't mean they're going to go out there and trade for 3 different elite playmakers and then sign 3 others and then bring back all their free agents. That's not realistic. I wish it was, but it's not. But I think that still, this is the time you have to attack if you're Eric Acosta and if you're the Ravens organization. Set Lamar up for these next 3, 4, 5 years, right? Set him up for the rest of this contract that he has, and also replenish the defense. But the most important part is even with the Madubuike extension, it's ever so important. It's as important as it was that you hit on your draft picks, first of all, and you hit on those around the margin, smaller free agent moves. Now, what does a big move actually mean? Well, I think that, when you talk about the running back position, it could be a big move, but I just don't expect that market to really be there for the most part, where you're not going to see a market for them of like $15 million plus. I think Saquon and Josh Jacobs will probably top that market, and I expect those average annual value numbers to be anywhere from $10 to $12 million per year for them, 13 max. I don't expect to see a $15 million plus market for running backs this year. For Derrick Henry, he's a little older, has a little more wear and tear on his body, and that has been pretty durable considering how many carries he's had in Tennessee. But that's a guy that I could see maybe signing for $6 to $10 million. I think that's a medium-sized move, even though the name is big. What a big move would be the $15 million plus per year, 4-year deal, 5-year deal. Marcus Williams essentially was that when the Ravens really, that whole offseason, they were all Tyrann Mathieu. And Matthew goes to the Saints and the Ravens sign Marcus Williams. Well, the whole thing happened the way it did. But I still think that for Baltimore, there's a lot of potential here. Do they go out? Do they target a Danielle Hunter, for example? Maybe on the offensive line, they like a guy, but I would expect the Ravens not to try to sign a free agent tackle per se. I'd expect them to maybe go more so in the draft for that, but maybe a corner is a guy they look at. Do they try, if Geno Stone leaves, do they replace him with a third safety? Now, I don't think those are going to be $15 million per year guys, but I don't know. Maybe they look at Calvin Ridley and pair him with Lamar. That would probably be a 13 to 15 million per year deal. I don't think Marquise Brown comes back, but that's kind of the deal I'm talking about a little bit here. I think an edge rusher, though, is the one. I think Danielle Hunter, that'd be a big move. Do they trade for Cortland Sutton? That'd be a big move. again, 2 medium moves or 1 big move from the outside, and then other outside smaller moves, I think is what Baltimore has equipped this year. Plus, obviously, you can't just only focus on the outside. Ideally, bringing back one or both of Ronald Darby and Arthur Millette, one or both of Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy. I would love Kevin Zeitler back if I'm the Ravens. I think, the big fish are probably gone in terms of Patrick Queen and Geno Stone, but I also think they're going to look at inside linebacker depth as well and maybe sign a third linebacker, a veteran guy that can be insurance for guys like Trenton Simpson. We know Roquan is Roquan, but there is a possibility Trenton just doesn't work out. So we saw the potential against Pittsburgh. I'm not saying it's not there, but there are injuries that can happen. There are different things. And right now the Ravens do need other insurance at inside linebacker if Patrick Queen does leave. So I'm not saying go and sign, this huge free agent to a $100 million contract. If you're going to do that, you're just going to sign Queen. But I know Devin White's been linked to the Ravens. Maybe that's the option. They get him on a lesser deal. Jordan Brooks. I don't. Jordan Brooks might be. It's interesting because you want Trenton Simpson to be able to develop, but you also don't want to just make it be a developmental year per se and punt on competing, which the Ravens aren't going to do anyway. It's, kind of silly to even say that. But what I'm trying to say is young guys, it takes time to develop, and sometimes that can come at the cost of a big play, or even it might cost you a game. So there has to be a balance. The Ravens have done a really good job at that, but we're going to see how they attack this offseason. I think a lot of different ways they can do it for sure. And tomorrow I'll be talking about just how big of players the Ravens can actually be in free agency. We're going to continue to get into free agent targets for the Ravens on another bonus episode, but I appreciate everybody tuning into this bonus episode of the show. Be sure to like this video on YouTube, subscribe to the channel, subscribe and follow along in audio form as well. Again, I'll see you right back here tomorrow for another bonus episode of Locked On Ravens.